Welcome to the Science for Sport podcast, where we dive into stories and insights that drive peak performance. Join us as we uncover the secrets behind the science of success. Here's your host, Richard Graves.
Hello and welcome to the Science for Sport podcast with me, Richard Graves. On this week's show, we're focusing on the issue of sports psychology. What is it that separates elite athletes from the rest of the pack? And why do they seem to thrive under the most intense pressure? And what can we do to ensure that we optimize opportunities when it matters most? Well, this week's guest has written a book on this issue called The Personal Podium Mindset for Success in Sport and Life. Dr. Hayley Perlus has a Ph.D. in sports psychology and has acted as a consultant to national team athletes. So let's hear from her now.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Dr. Hayley Perlus, we're delighted to have you on the Science for Sport podcast. Joining us from Colorado, I've got to say for our viewers, if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, Science for Sport, you'll notice the sun shining through the window over Hayley's shoulder. We're here in the UK, and I've got to tell you, in the middle of December, I don't think at the height of the day it gets as light as you are. So we're already jealous. But for those listeners that aren't familiar with your background, Hayley, just give us a brief resume and bring us up to speed to where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So today, you're right. Colorado blue skies is what they share. So twist my arm that I moved here from Canada, which is where I'm originally from. And always had a sport background. I was a ski racer growing up, and then a ski coach. And then going through college and university, I was a group fitness instructor and trainer. And then just climbed my way to a Ph.D. in sports psychology. And today I have a private practice working with athletes. I have a speaking business in the corporate world as well. And then I create content for online purposes as well.
It's been quite a rise, and I think at a time when the focus has never been as intense as it is on psychology in sport, there are a few better people than yourself to discuss this subject with, because you mentioned that at a young age you were a competitive skier, and I know that there's a story that you've told about your coach at the time, right at the start of the biggest race of your young career at that point, dangling $100 bill in front of you and saying, I'm that confident you're going to win. I'm putting this on you right now. As a young, relatively inexperienced competitor at the time, what sort of pressure did that put on you, and how do you handle it?
That race was not only the biggest race, as a young athlete, but it shaped my life. So yes, my coach, pulled out $100 bill and told me that he had bet on me. He didn't tell me he was confident in me, and he didn't use those words, but he just said, I bet on you. And I bring that up because it can really go two ways. In that moment, that pressure puts me and it puts all of us in an emotional and mental fork in the road. On one hand, how could a coach bet on me and tell me right before I'm about to compete, what if I make a mistake? What if he's wrong? On the other hand, hey, if my coach believes in me so much that he's willing to bet on me, doesn't that mean I'm doing something right? Doesn't that mean I should believe in myself? And thankfully, he knew me well enough to know that I would be someone who embraces that pressure. He probably knew it more than I did. And so I went down that race course thinking, this is super cool. He must believe in me, therefore I'm going to believe in myself. And with that comes all of the reasons then why I can win it. I've won every race so far this year. I slept well. I know this course. It's a technical course. That's me. And so, all of the proof. And went down, won the event. My coach came down, congratulated me, kept the money for himself. But he said something to me in that moment that completely shaped my life. He said, it's amazing what your performance can be like when you get your head straight. And then 2 weeks later, he brought a sports psychologist to come and speak to my team. And I decided right then and there that that's what I wanted to do.
It's a remarkable story, and it's often in the most unexpected circumstances that a future path is laid out for you, as was the case in this particular instance. But equally, I know there will be athletes, there will be coaches listening to that story and saying, well, not everybody has the same mentality. That sort of pressure, equally on a fragile mindset, could prove to be detrimental. So I know this is a subject that is close to your heart and you've discussed it at length previously, but how do you go about forming that mindset, that strength, that belief in yourself, so that when that moment arises, be it taking a penalty kick in soccer, football, serving to take a major title at the US Open or Wimbledon, when that moment presents itself, how do you ensure that you are in the best possible mental state to take full advantage?
Yeah, it's the main question. That's how we master the mental game. And to all those coaches listening, I'm not going to ask you to go bet on your players right now. Or
They'll be relieved.
Yeah, or at least go and tell them. And I'm sure the parents are happy that I just said that as well, and the athletes. But listen, life is pressure. And it's so interesting because on one hand, I think we want a stress-free life, but is that really true? How many of us are trying out to get ahead in our careers or to get ahead in our personal lives too? It's not just our careers. So we have to tell the story that pressure is good, and we make pressure our friend. And as soon as you feel that pressure, like I said, you're at an emotional and mental fork in the road. We may not always have control of the initial reaction, but we do have control how long we let debilitating thoughts and debilitating emotions, linger. So in that moment, you can even picture, if you're a visual person, a fork in the road. And on one hand, it's anger, fear, frustration, worry. And sometimes those actually can be good. They ignite us. They, spark some motivation. But if we live there, it's detrimental. But that's one side that we could go for. And then the other side is passion and challenge and, alignment and purpose. And if we can find ourselves there eventually, okay, I feel this pressure, that's a challenge, but it's not a fear. And fear makes us retreat long term. Challenge makes us defeat. And then, like everyone, you just engage in the training like I did. Okay, well, why is my coach believing in me? Because I won every race so far this season. Because this is a technical course and that's where I shine. Because I know that I've been training and that I'm strong. So then you come up with all of the reasons. So the pressure is something that we use to create a story around, and then we have to come up with all of the productive truths that will help us persevere. And it's the greatest competitive advantage.
How do you make that work for you as an individual? How do you make that work for you as a team? Because you'll know the story with the Washington Nationals in baseball. It took them well over 80 years to win the World Series for the first time in 2019. Equally, the Boston Red Sox were a similar story. You can go into, as we would call it, football over here, with Liverpool having won a first Premier League title back in 2020-21. That was the first time in well over 2 decades that they did that. You look at the NFL now, and all the talk is about the Dallas Cowboys, how they just can't win a playoff game because they're haunted by the triplets and the team of the 90s. So I listen to what you say and say, yeah, I want some of that. I want that self-belief. I want that confidence. But all around us, whatever sporting sphere you look at, there are just as many examples of teams, individuals struggling to get over that hump. So how do you make that work for you and make it your competitive advantage?
So in that situation, and it's now escaping which NFL team. They won the Super Bowl, and their mantra was, "Why not us?" It would, why not us? And what we need to do is first, like I said, sometimes that negative, we call it negative, but it can be helpful. So the unpleasant, I'll say, emotions of fear, anger, that actually will work. So no one thinks we can do it. So we're going to use that energy for good, not bad. We're going to use that to ignite us, but we can't live in it because doubt comes with that. If we're experiencing a whole lot of anxiety, doubt will start to seep in. So we can use that anxiety initially to ignite us, but then it's back to this play, this throw, what our strengths are. And in professional sports, and what we can learn from professional sports and apply it to our life, is that on game day, when it's go time, you go and highlight your strengths. You're not focusing on your weaker links at that moment. You're working on your improvements and training. But when it's go time, you highlight your strengths. So to kind of bring it together, I think it's okay at first to use that anxiety if you're feeling it. No one can think we can do it. Everyone's waiting for us to be the team that, finally gets this championship after decades. You can use that to ignite you, but you can't live there. You have to get to work and you have to go and highlight your strengths. And teams do it all the time.
Absolutely, they do. That is what makes sports so dramatic. That's what makes it so captivating and exhilarating when you live in the moment. So, what are the methodologies that you use now as a professional that's got a PhD in sports psychology when you visit an individual or a team? What do you find works best for you and, more importantly, your clients?
Kind of, Richard, it's kind of jumping on what I just talked about. In every first meeting, obviously athletes are coming to me not because everything's going well. Obviously they're coming to me because they have some type of mental block or something's not working for them and they want to target that, and we will. But in order to target that, I want to know what your top 3 strengths are. I want to know what makes you, the greatest you. And I want technical, tactical strategy things, because when the going gets tough, in those moments when they're starting to feel that fear, anger, frustration, worry, and they're not using it for good. Now they're using it for bad. They have to be able to say, okay, I know I can rely on my hand-eye coordination. I know I have, I have the intellect. I can read these plays. I know I can run. I know I have agility. I know I can pass. Whatever their strengths are, that they don't have to, obviously everything can be improved, but they already know that they own these strengths. They go out there and use them. And from there, sometimes the mental block is totally conquered because they are going back to their, professional athletes always say that it goes back to the fundamentals. Well, in sports psychology, I believe that there are fundamental confidence skills, and it's harnessing those strengths. So that's the first thing I do. And then from there, we most often have a little bit more motivation, a little bit more confidence, and a little bit more focus. So then when they come to me and they share their mental block, why can I do it in practice and I can't do it in competition? I'm just not getting this one thing that I've been focusing on improving. It's just not sticking. So I'm not getting the attention that I want, whatever the mental block may be, not relating well with my teammates or my coaches. We come from a place of strength, and with that, we can then go attack those mental blocks.
I remember hearing about Johnny Wilkinson, one of the greatest ever fly halves that English rugby has ever seen, and a member of the only England team to win a World Cup 20 years ago now, back in 2003. But one of his great strengths was his goal-kicking ability, and he always used to say that as part of his routine in a packed stadium of 80+ thousand fans, if he was looking to kick a goal, he'd pick one person in the middle of the sticks, sat in the stand, and he'd block out all the noise, and he was aiming to kick the ball right through them. I guess that the point of that is, in the most extreme, tense, pressurized situation, it's about having the fundamentals, a routine that you know is rock solid and you can fall back and rely on. And if you have that, everything else falls into place, even under the most duress, doesn't it?
Yes. And what you just identified there, in addition, is the ability to know what's relevant and irrelevant in the moment. So the fans, what just happened in the last play, what may happen in the future, irrelevant. Roger Federer actually said this when he was explaining. I think it was at Dartmouth when he gave his speech, his commencement speech. He said, in the moment, the point is the only thing that matters. But once that point is played, win or lose, it doesn't matter at all. You have to know what's relevant, which is the next point. And for your example, he knew his strengths and he picked one person And then everything else was irrelevant. And one of my athletes, he was a motocross athlete, he uses the word, it all goes on mute. Like
Yeah.
he presses mute and it all goes blurry. And then all he sees is what's relevant in the moment, which for him is highlighting his strengths and only seeing what he needs to see.
It's the golden chalice that all of us, any athlete, aspires to achieve, to be the very best at what you're doing at any time, isn't it? Which leads me on to my next question. You were obviously at a good standard when you were a competitive skier. So what was it about sports psychology and the theory side of sport that lured you away from competitive racing?
So interestingly enough, I mean, I love competition. I do. I love sports. But as soon as that experience when I was 12 and that sports psychologist came, I just thought she was the coolest thing ever. She was teaching us how to quiet our minds, control our emotions so that our bodies could do what we've been training it to do when it was the most important time to do it. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. And then from there, I started having these imageries, these daydreams of me helping other athletes get medals around their necks. It wasn't me standing on top of the podium anymore. It was me standing, watching athletes that I helped stand on top of the podium. And so it was an easy choice. Plus, I knew that I had 10 years of university ahead of me if I wanted to do this. So I quickly, it wasn't really a difficult decision, if I'm completely honest. I wanted the career in sports psychology, wanted more than I wanted to see how far I could go in my sport. And I own that, and I think it's okay. And I actually think it's okay for people to hear that because it may be for them as well.
How satisfying is it then when you've been on a journey with an individual or team and you see them achieve their goals, achieve that success, knowing that you've been part of that?
It warms my heart, and I love it when my athletes text me on their own. So just about a month ago, I got a text from an athlete. He was in the Austria Nationals, and he just like, it was before the competition, but I just want to catch you up. For him, we were working on this theory of just letting thoughts come and go that were not helpful. And we use this imagery of flow, like a river flowing in and out. So he's like, I'm working on my flowing. And then he placed second in the nationals. And then in an interview, he talked about the greatest improvement he made was his mindset and staying calm and letting his body do what it knows to do. And for me, there's no better feeling. And I used to also, I don't right now, but I used to be a professor for 9 years. And it was just such a cool experience when a student, who most often was an athlete as well, would come up to me and say, I want to be a sports psychologist. That's what I want to do with my career.
Imitation
Really?
is the best form of flattery, isn't it? I guess.
Really?
I know you've written a book on this whole topic and various examples and methodologies you can use around it for those of our listeners and viewers that are interested in this. It's called the Personal Podium Mindset for Success in Sport and Life. I wonder, as you're writing this and recalling previous experiences, are you constantly learning as well? Preconceived ideas that you might have had suddenly change because of an instance, an example, a scenario that you may not have encountered or factored in?
Absolutely. All the time. So I don't compete against anyone else anymore, although I get on a treadmill and I look to my right, and they don't know that we're in competition, but we certainly are in competition. But
there's no tougher opponent than yourself.
Right. But I'm definitely always competing against myself, and I use these tools all the time. And one such tool that I've changed is, the saying, fake it till you make it. I have a hard time with that one now. So I used to just pretend you're the person you want to be. I have a hard time with that right now. So I'm more of trying actually to find something I do believe in, that I do trust, using that and then building on that instead of faking anything. It just didn't fit well with me, which brings me to one more. Sports psychology is a science, which is probably why we're on your podcast, the science of sport, but it's also an art. And so the greatest thing that I've learned in my career is that we can teach these fundamental tools of psychology to athletes, but then I really want them to take them in, practice them, and then do it their way. Figure out which ones and how they each work for them in their specific situation and for their specific person.
And I guess the opportunity working in this space, it has never been greater, has it? Especially when you factor in as well the boom in popularity and growth of women's sports. Over in the UK recently, the Sports Personality of the Year was won by Keely Hodgkinson, the Olympic 800-metre gold medalist from this past summer's games in Paris. And be it football, rugby, cricket, baseball, softball, whatever sport it might be, women's sports is booming right now. And I guess in your role, with your experience, this is an area where it can enhance the growth of women's sports still further as it becomes more professional, both in terms of finance and in the way of preparation for each individual athlete.
Absolutely. I mean, this is part of the game now, which is so nice. When I started in my Ph.D. program, there was only 2 of us in the entire program. Now, first of all, there are so many sports psychology graduate programs all over universities, and the actual departments are bigger. So it's huge. And then athletes aren't so shy about it. Coaches aren't shy about it. We're all utilizing it. And, for women in particular who do have certain pressures, in order to be the first I want to be the first woman in this sport, certain goals that they have, the mindset will only help. It cannot hurt. It can only help.
And as you mentioned there, it's not just about being part of professional sport and being successful. Obviously, in biological makeup, female athletes have different things to deal with, and equally, that then affects preparation, it affects careers, and it's something I think, just in a community sense, all of us are only just coming to grips with now. It's no good just transplanting the preparation you'd have for male athletes across the women's game, because you're dealing with individuals, and to get the optimum out of each individual, you have to tailor the preparation to their specific needs.
Yeah, it's different. And in addition, athletes have the added pressure, if we're talking about pressure, of now they're a brand, they're a business before they even, so there's just a lot, and that's both for men and women. And, it's really important to be able to embrace those stressors, embrace those pressures. And you're right. We are all different. We are all unique. And there are certain philosophies, certain concepts, certain tools that will work for women. And I don't want to just categorize not all women, but, there are differences. I believe, women and men are certainly equal, but we're not necessarily the same. So so certain tools will work for one person and not work for the other, and vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the coaches, athletes that are tuning into this podcast now, when you talk about psychology and being mentally tough, and embracing the moment, what would your top 5 tips for both coaches and athletes be to give you the best preparation possible?
Okay. Great question. And here's my first for sure. Then let me think about the other 4. But the first one is, we have to remember this. The best athlete is not the perfect athlete. The best athlete who wins the trophy at the end of the day is the best recoverer often. So we need to strive for perfection. I don't know any athlete, I don't know any person that I've ever worked with that doesn't want to be perfect. So strive for perfection, but as soon as you demand it, that is unnecessary, additional negative pressure. So it's about, to me, it's 2 goals. It's striving for perfection, but also having the goal of being the best recoverer. And that is an emotional reset sometimes. Novak Djokovic talks about that all the time. That's something that he has had to learn to do. He still needs to, he still is not perfect. But when he has an emotional outburst, he's able to, something that he's trained himself to do is quickly reset and recover and move on. So that to me would be, the number 1. It's not just about being perfect. It's about being the best recoverer. The second piece is probably what we've been talking about, is using stress as your friend. Uh, do you remember the movie? It's a football movie, The Replacements. Do you remember that old
I
movie?
am aware of it, yes.
So in the movie, the coach, oh, now I forget the actor's name, but the coach says to Keanu Reeves, the player, winners want the ball. Winners always want the ball. And what does that mean? To me, it means we need to take responsibility for ourselves. And we need to own the good times. We need to own the bad times, but we need to take responsibility. Self-belief is not given to us. I believe that self-belief is earned. And we earn it not just by the results, we earn it by having the courage to be curious about our opportunities, to expose ourselves to difficult things, to, create experiences for ourselves and to learn. And that's where self-belief is earned. So that would be the third. You asked for five, right?
Two more to go.
Two more to go. Two more to go. I'm a big believer in goal setting, but I think some of us spend way too much time setting way too many goals. And sometimes the goals aren't really going to help us. If you have a dream, great. I would never tell someone not to have a dream. If you have a dream, great. If you don't have a dream, that's perfectly okay. What you need to do, though, is have what I call in the book the next goal. And that could be a week away, a month away. I wouldn't go any more than a year. But, what am I looking to accomplish? And then you have your now goals, which are your process. How am I going to make my next goal come true? And then I'm a huge believer that when you start focusing on your next goals and achieving those with your, what am I going to do now? Your dreams will be revealed to you. You'll see what you're capable of. You'll see what the opportunities are. Your dream will come. So don't freak out. Don't be upset if you're struggling. But other than that, I don't know if we need any additional goals. Sometimes we get confused and overwhelmed.
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke to a colleague only this past week, and one of the things they said is that they believe, whilst it's good to reflect and learn from past experiences, they feel that quite often too much time is spent on reflection and not enough on looking forward. What are the opportunities that can be taken advantage of? So absolutely, to have a path forward, to have a goal, to know where you want to go, that can only be positive rather than reflecting on what's already gone. And frankly, you can't change what's already happened.
No, you can't. And then last but not least, to add to the fifth, so we need to practice some stillness. Recovery, I know I talked about recovering is if you drop the ball, go quickly pick it back up and recover, keep going. But there's also the recovery in letting not just your body recover, but also your mind. And there's something called the brilliance of boredom. And the brilliance of boredom is when you allow yourself to stare out the window, for example, and be bored. When you and I were younger and we went on road trips with our parents, we didn't have devices. We didn't have televisions. We stared out the window and we were bored and we became brilliant. The ideas, if you're trying to work on something's not making sense, it might make sense when you just kind of let it go and detach and allow yourself to just be bored. And we're constantly overstimulated, constantly having the pressure to keep moving. So we need to practice some stillness and let ourselves, mind, body, and soul, just have a moment of relaxation, because there's some beauty in that and there's some brilliance in that.
Yeah, but back in the day, I would have termed that as just having a moment to collect your thoughts. Again,
Right.
shut out all the noise, have a moment to just collect your thoughts, and then move forward. I wonder, as we start turning the corner towards a new year and all that entails it in 2025, what is it that excites you most?
Oh, I love that question because I'm not a big fan of New Year's resolutions.
I deliberately stayed away from them.
It's funny, last week I created a post about this. I believe the greatest thing that we can do is be curious. We're so judgmental right now, especially with, we're just everywhere we look, there's constantly showcasing everyone and comparison and judgment of ourselves and judgment of others. So let's turn back the curiosity And let's just all look out there and without any barriers, what are the opportunities? I'm looking out and I'm saying, what are the opportunities? And then from there, I can start to get excited and start to ask myself, okay, how can I get closer to that one? How can I get closer to that one? And it's completely, I do my best to not judge myself in the moment. It's just really being about, curious and open to the new opportunities that 2025 can create.
I think that's possibly the best advice that I've heard as we head into the new year. Listen, Dr. Hayley Perlus, it's been fascinating chatting to you. We've covered a whole range of areas of sports psychology. For those that are intrigued, want to know a little bit more and a little bit more about your work, where can they find you and find out more?
The best place is my website, drhaleyperlus.com, just DR. And they can opt in. They can write me a message. I get every single one of them. So if you don't hear from me, it went into spam or something. So try to email me again. But that's the best place. And then they can get these weekly updates and find out everything else from that website.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time. Wish you all the best and a very happy new year for 2025. And we'll have to talk again sometime soon and explore a little bit more as well, because already I've got a whole plethora of questions that we could go down.
I'm looking forward to it, Richard. Thank you so much.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Many thanks to Dr. Hayley Perlus for her insight and her expertise on the subject of sports psychology. If it's something that interests you, then you can find out more by visiting our website, www.scienceforsport.com. And if you've enjoyed this edition of the Science for Sport podcast, then please help us spread the word by sharing it with a coach, a colleague, an athlete, or a friend. As I always point out, the more people we can get downloading this podcast, the easier it is for us to attract top-name athletes and experts at the very top of their profession. That is just about all from me on this week's edition of the Science for Sport podcast. I look forward to talking to you again next week when we'll have another expert at the top of their field on Science for Sport.
Subscribe to the Science for Sport podcast now, wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more insights, resources, and to join the Academy, visit scienceforsport.com and connect with us on social media by searching for @ScienceForSport. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.